Okay, hello, my name is Dr. Sian Nicholas, and I'm reader in modern British history at Aberystwyth University, where I've taught for, oh my goodness, something over 20 years now. What do I research? Well, I'm a historian of the mass media. My research is on the history of the mass media in 20th century Britain, that is newspapers, cinema, radio and television. And my particular interest actually in the history of the media in wartime, so First World War newspapers and cinema, and especially the Second World War, which is my area of real preference, where I look at newspapers, cinema and radio. And in fact, many years ago I did my doctoral research on the BBC and its home front broadcasting in the Second World War, and I'm just recently winding up a project looking at the British press in the Second World War. The reason I like this area of study, I think, is just the sheer range of topics and themes it incorporates. So, I can look at political history, how politicians sell themselves at election times and other times. I can look at propaganda, of course, in war and in peacetime. It also encompasses social history, looking at how people in the past saw and understood the world around them and how they understood their own societies, other nations, social issues, political issues, things of that kind. And it also raises really interesting questions about history and popular memory. How media representations of the past, or representations in the past, affect how we remember the past. So just a very recent example, how Winston Churchill is portrayed in those recent films, Darkest Hour, and I think the other one was just called Churchill. Or something I like to ask my students, if you think of the First World War, do you think of it in colour and in black and white? A lot of my students think a while and then realise black and white, or actually not even black and white, brown and white. And why is that? Because their picture of the past of the First World War comes from photographs, newsreels, of course, taken at the time when there was only black and white film. How did I get into this topic? Well, in some ways, I'm not altogether sure. I mean, I've always been interested, I suppose, less with what happened in the past, sort of, events and high politics, than what people at the time thought was happening in the past. How people knew things, what they knew, through what means they knew. I mean, even when I was, in high school doing English literature, I was always more interested in, not so much in, the language and the metaphor and all the rest of it in Shakespeare's plays, but actually in how they might have been staged and what people at the time would have made of the messages, the political messages or the social messages within them. So I think I've always been interested in communication in the past. I can actually, though, pinpoint exactly how I got interested in the BBC in the Second World War, which became, as I said, my doctoral subject, because I was in a museum in London called the Cabinet War Rooms, which, if you ever get to London, please go. It is the best, most evocative museum I've ever been in. It's part of the Imperial War Museum, but it is literally, it's the underground passageways and rooms underneath Whitehall, underneath Parliament, where Winston Churchill and the War Cabinet and leading generals and military figures, as well as a whole load of secretarial staff, would go during the air raids. They would go down underground, under Downing Street, and would govern from there. And after the war was over, they simply sealed it up. And then in, I think, late 70s, early 1980s, they reopened it and found it almost completely untouched. So, the maps were still on the walls with the pins still in them. There were paper clips still on the desks, and they simply tidied it up a little bit and turned it into a museum. and I was visiting there, and they had on the wall one of those loudspeakers that was playing, I think, a news bulletin from the BBC, an old wartime news bulletin, and I still remember it just gave me absolute chill. I just stood there for a moment and thought, I want to know more about that. I want to know what people at the time thought was going on. I don't need to read a history book about, how many bombs were dropped or whatever else. I want to know what people were told. And that was really the start of a very long career, looking at what people were told, what people understood, what people felt in the Second World War and in other periods as well. Why is this field of history important? Well, my old doctoral supervisor, Asa Briggs, used to say the history of broadcasting is the history of everything. And I would go further than that. I'd say the history of the mass media is the history of everything. And by that I simply mean the history of the mass media is the history of how people have understood the world around them, whether we're looking at politics or society or economic change or technological developments. Everything people know about the world around them comes from forms of communication, and if you understand those forms of communication, you can come closer to understanding what people believed and why they believed it in particular periods, and then why they acted as they did. I think you can see it today as you would have been able to do in the past. What we know about the world around us comes to us from the communications media. It may be social media today. It would have been newspapers and newsreels at the turn of the 19th, 20th century. It would have been news sheets in the turn of the 18th, 19th century. But that's what you know about the world around you, what you read, what you watch, what you listen to, or what you tweet about. And this may be completely different to what's really happening in the world, to the way that the events pan out. But it's not how events pan out that affects necessarily how people act and what they do. It's what they believe is happening. And what I want to know isn't so much what happened in the past, although of course you need to know what happened in the past first, but after that I want to know what people knew, what people believed, what people were told, what they understood about the times they were living through, because only then can you understand their actions and can you understand that whole level of historical action. I'll leave it there though. Thank you.